Well, I think so the question is really where are the limits to how far we're willing to go in following or submitting to leaders. If we frame leadership, the biblical view of leadership correctly, we get two different categories. We get the civil category, which is the government has the power of the sword. They're responsible for law and order, and you got to submit to kind of the civic authorities, and that's that one. The other one would be spiritual leadership, which would be leadership in the kingdom or in the church or whatever it is. And that leadership is very different, or is supposed to be characterized or framed up very differently, in that it's not top down, it's bottom up. So it's servant leadership. So it's pretty easy. The first one, you go along with it till it violates a moral code, or violates a spiritual law that somehow the state is going to tell you you can't worship God or whatever. So, it's very much the way America was founded. You go along with the authority until that authority breaks its trust. In other words, it's no longer functioning in the way that it ought to function, and then you have a right to kind of evaluate what your options are. With spiritual authority, that ought to feel a lot more like servant leadership. That's pretty easy. Submitting to it shouldn't feel oppressive. So the question of submitting to somebody that wants to serve you or has your best interest at heart or those kinds of things ought not be something that very difficult to do. That's kind of why last week, in talking here at Antioch, I said I just have a real hard time with talks on tithing and money. I know they bring health to a church. I know that it does help people create a discipline of being generous that ultimately I think is a good thing in their life. I think all of that is very good. But if I talk about tithing, I know myself, and I'm really seeing the end result in the money that I think that could come. I'm not seeing the individuals. I'm not looking at the individuals and first and foremost caring about that. I'm distracted by this other end goal. And to me, that feels like a violation of leadership. It feels like it's top down. It's about me, this organization. Do we have enough resources to do this or that? How does it feel? It's about me gaining. It's not about me serving. And so that's kind of why I brought that up last week. It's just like, not that I always get it right, but I just don't want to break trust from a servant standpoint, or that my end goal is the health. And so I think in answer to your question of when is there a limit to that kind of leadership, it's when it really does get out of bounds and begin to try to control or speak into your life in a way that's beyond the positional authority. And there are churches where pastors will claim a type of submission that almost makes them a bit cultish. I think you can run from that. I think when that influence, because again, leadership is influence, it's taking you somewhere or pushing you somewhere. When it begins to not resonate with truths, so doctrinally, biblically, theologically, even if at that point, if it's a servant leadership thing, but it's leading you in error, then you have the right to say, I'm not going to follow you down that road. I know from Scripture that your voice and the voice of Scripture are at odds. And I was talking to someone earlier, brought a good point to mind that when I was a new Christian, I read the Bible a lot, and I said, hey, wait a second. Everything I hear from youth pastors seems to be really different than what I'm picking up in Scripture. And then I had this oh my gosh, well, I don't want to side with these guys. I want to side with Scripture. And the same should be true for people at Antioch. Monday through Saturday, as you read Scripture, or you should go to Scripture to read it, and make sure what you're hearing on Sundays maps on, that it's got the same tenor, it's the content is the same. And it's not going to be perfect, but you know what I'm saying. And so I think even if somebody's a nice guy, or even if somebody is serving you, from a truth standpoint, if they begin to lead you into error, that's another point where you just say, I have to remove myself from this, and I'm not going to submit to your authority because I feel like you've violated that authority. You've started preaching a message that's different than the message that was handed down. So those are a couple of different aspects in how we would evaluate authority and whether to put ourselves underneath it. Certainly we could chase it down a lot further, but we'll just leave it there for now.